there's a strange burden that comes with seeing too much, thinking too deeply, and feeling the distance between yourself and the rest of the world grow every year. Schopenhauer warned us about it, the loneliness that isn't born from neglect or rejection, but from intellect itself. When you start perceiving life with uncommon clarity, companionship becomes a paradox. You crave connection, but every shallow conversation tightens the ache within you. You admire humanity, yet find it exhausting. Schopenhauer believed that intelligence stretches consciousness beyond the dimensions in which ordinary society comfortably lives. To him, the intelligent person sees through conventions, illusions, and collective delusions too quickly, and in doing so, detaches from them. The crowd functions through shared beliefs, rituals, and illusions that give life coherence. But when you pierce that veil, what's left? You see chaos where others see order, consequence where others see comfort, mortality where others see meaning. And while wisdom might illuminate, it also isolates. Tell me this: if seeing truth makes one lonely, is ignorance then a form of mercy? We often underestimate how social reality is constructed around simplifications. We bond through mutual delusion, shared optimism, trivial pursuits, symbolic games that distract us from the void beneath. The highly intelligent loner doesn't reject these games out of arrogance, but out of inability. They can't unsee what they've seen. It's like being the only one who knows how the magic trick works. You can never again applaud sincerely. Schopenhauer wrote that the higher one's intelligence, the more one tends to isolation, because thinking deeply alienates you from those who live at the surface. And yet, that isolation isn't vanity, it's the price of seeing differently. You talk less, observe more, and depend on solitude the way others depend on noise. The mind becomes a home and a prison simultaneously. You crave meaningful conversation, but realize that meaning itself has become rare currency. When everyone speaks in borrowed phrases, what do you do with thoughts that no one can translate? The tragedy is that understanding the world too well doesn't give you peace, it gives you perspective, and perspective is heavy. Do you ever feel that like knowledge expanded your world, but shrunk your community?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Let's consider the psychological structure behind this. Schopenhauer didn't view loneliness as merely circumstantial, he saw it as existential. Humanity, he said, lives driven by the will to life, the blind desire that fuels striving, competing, propagating. Most people live happily within that current, absorbed by careers, pleasures, politics, possessions. But the intellectual individual interrupts the current. They question why. They detach instinct to examine intellect. And in doing so, they escape the gravitational field of ordinary life, but at the cost of belonging. What once animated them becomes absurd. The party feels lifeless, the goals meaningless, the chatter empty. You don't despise others, you simply no longer share their appetite for illusion. Schopenhauer called this the tragic gift of awareness. It's why many thinkers, artists, and creators oscillate between wonder and despair. The same mind that unravels cosmic truth can't always cope with everyday banality. The mind that sees beauty in chaos also sees futility in ambition. So what's the solution? To repress awareness and rejoin the crowd, or to endure solitude and preserve authenticity? The wise know the answer. Solitude must be mastered, not escaped. But mastering solitude requires courage most people never cultivate. Could it be that our century's epidemic of loneliness is actually an epidemic of undeveloped self-sufficiency? Now imagine our world from Schopenhauer's perspective today. Noise everywhere, speed replacing reflection, dopamine replacing meaning. He would probably laugh bitterly at how we call loneliness a disorder when it's often the soul begging for silence. He once said that a man can be himself only so long as he is alone, because solitude is the only climate where authenticity breathes freely. But let's be honest, how many of us are truly comfortable with our own company? Today's intelligent loner faces a new challenge: infinite connection but zero contact. We scroll endlessly among multitudes, yet find none who understand our interior life. The digital crowd has replaced the physical one, but the alienation remains identical. Schopenhauer might call this progress without purpose, humanity striving for constant stimulation, mistaking activity for meaning. The highly intelligent loner, aware of this illusion, quietly withdraws. They no longer seek attention but integrity, not popularity, but presence. Still, each night the same question returns. Does understanding life deeply make it more bearable or more absurd? What's the point of mastering reality if reality cannot give you mastery over your longing? And here's the paradoxical wisdom buried in Schopenhauer's warning. What isolates you refines you. Loneliness, if embraced consciously, becomes transformation. The absence of compatible minds becomes the presence of your own unfiltered thought. When you stop seeking validation, you begin constructing inner freedom. Schopenhauer advised that solitude, while painful initially, eventually produces dignity, the independence of thought that grants you peace from society's madness. But that peace isn't painless. It demands the death of illusion. You must accept that not everyone is meant to understand you, and that solitude isn't the absence of connection but the refinement of it. The intelligent loner learns to cultivate self-dialogue as art thinking becomes meditation and isolation becomes discipline. In the end, the higher mind must choose between two discomforts, the discomfort of solitude or the discomfort of conformity. Only one leads to wisdom. So I leave you with Schopenhauer's most haunting challenge. If you must walk alone, can you learn to enjoy your own depth, or will you drown in it? Schopenhauer believed that intelligence sharpens perception to the point of pain. The more we see, the less we can tolerate the illusions that comfort others. He argued that most people live inside what he called the veil of Maya, a dreamlike filter that softens the raw brutality of life. It keeps existence bearable, concealing the absurd repetition of desire, suffering, and decay. But when that veil tears, and believe me, higher intelligence rips it effortlessly, you stand face to face with the naked structure of reality. Endless striving, inevitable loss, and transient joy. For many, such nakedness is unbearable. The intelligent loner doesn't suffer because the world rejects them, they suffer because they've glimpsed too much truth to join the masquerade. They can play along, yes, but their laughter never quite reaches their eyes. Their awareness turns fellowship into performance, joy into analysis, and purpose into paradox. Schopenhauer said, "The wise are not sad because they know, but because they cannot unknow." The curse of clarity is irreversible perception. You can't go back once the lights are on. This emotional exile grows subtly. It's not that we suddenly stop relating to others, it's that connection becomes filtered through understanding. You start noticing the unconscious motives behind every conversation, the layers of self-deception inside every relationship, the inertia of habit behind every so-called choice. You see how rarely people speak from authenticity, how much of what we call love is mere projection, how most conflicts are eruptions of unacknowledged pain. It's not that you become cynical, quite the opposite. You become heartbreakingly empathetic. You feel the absurd struggle in everyone, including yourself, and realize how impossible total communication truly is. That's why Schopenhauer saw compassion and detachment as twins. The one who understands too clearly must distance themselves just to survive emotionally. But here's the real tragedy: when your empathy becomes too broad, you stop belonging anywhere specific. You care deeply, yet do not attach easily. You listen profoundly, but rarely feel heard. You carry oceans inside you that few have the courage or vocabulary to explore. So let me ask you, if empathy deepens with intelligence, does understanding others fully mean losing the chance to be understood yourself? Schopenhauer's solution was paradoxical but profound: withdrawal not as refusal, but as refinement. He likened society to a blazing furnace of human vanity and triviality, and said the thinker must sometimes retreat to preserve clarity of mind and gentleness of heart. Isolation, to him, was not misanthropy, it was hygiene for the soul. In solitude, the intelligent loner can drop the exhausting empathy of daily contact and rediscover non-judgmental awareness. It's in these moments that clarity softens from curse to insight. We begin to see our exile differently, not as punishment, but as the price of differentiation. The philosopher, the artist, the contemplative, they all pay this price so that something new may emerge through them. Creation is born from this tempering. The challenge is to withstand the solitude long enough for it to transmute bitterness into vision. Jung later called this inner endurance, holding the tension of opposites. But Schopenhauer reached that truth earlier. The thinking individual's task is not to escape pain, but to interpret it. Can you carry knowledge without letting it corrupt your joy? Can you retain clarity without losing wonder? What makes this insight terrifying is that sugar-coated with spiritual comfort. He didn't claim that loneliness would be beautifully redeemed. He saw life as a cycle of perpetual dissatisfaction, the will to life forever chasing what it cannot hold. From that standpoint, the intelligent loner is simply someone who stops pretending and faces the futility honestly. Yet even in that bleak realism, there's liberation. Once you stop expecting lasting satisfaction from transient things, the world stops controlling you. You become emotionally invincible not by numbing your heart, but by accepting the impermanence of everything it desires. Schopenhauer hinted that real happiness isn't exuberant, it's serene. The wise person's joy doesn't come from achieving their will, but from understanding its limitations. Think about that. Maybe the purpose of high intelligence isn't to fix existence, but to accept it fully, to illuminate it so calmly that even tragedy acquires aesthetic beauty. Could that be what he meant when he said, "To live alone is the fate of all great souls"? Maybe greatness begins when we stop begging for comfort from illusions. But the practical side of this insight matters most. Being an intelligent loner doesn't mean resigning from humanity, it means engaging it differently. Instead of demanding deep conversation from every acquaintance, you learn to cherish silence. Instead of chasing recognition, you produce excellence privately. Instead of waiting for soulmate understanding, you build inner harmony. Schopenhauer would tell us to treat solitude as an art form, the art of self-dialogue, so refined that external conversation becomes an option, not a necessity. This transforms loneliness into sovereignty. Because when you no longer depend on misunderstanding crowds for affirmation, you become free to move among them without bitterness. Compassion becomes effortless because you expect nothing in return. You see their delusions, yes, but you also recognize yours. And in that shared fragility arises humility, the rarest intelligence of all. So maybe the curse of clarity is also its grace. It strips away false comfort so that authentic contentment can finally appear. When the illusions are gone, what remains is truth. And if you can learn to love truth, even when it burns, you no longer inhabit exile, you inhabit freedom. Schopenhauer wrote that the more unintelligent a man is, the less mysterious existence seems to him. To the crowd, existence feels obvious, predictable, manageable. But to the highly intelligent loner, mystery is not an abstract idea, it's a constant companion. We see the world as movement without destination, a vortex of desires endlessly consuming themselves. And this perception makes conformity impossible. Our solitude, then, is not accidental, it's rebellion. Not rebellion against people, but against unconsciousness. We withdraw not because we despise humanity, but because we refuse to be swept along by its sleepwalking rhythm. Schopenhauer's warning was that most people mistake our retreat for arrogance, when in reality it is self-preservation. Ordinary conversation feels like being asked to dance blindfolded to broken music we could join, but at what cost to our tempo? So we rebel quietly, building small fortresses of thought where honesty can breathe. Yet, paradoxically, the very silence that protects us also separates us. To inhabit solitude consciously is to risk disappearing from the map of ordinary belonging. Tell me, have you ever noticed that the more authentic you become, the fewer people remain around you? But here's the secret Schopenhauer never wanted us to forget. Solitude is not absence, it's preparation. The solitary thinker accumulates energy that others disperse through distraction. Every moment of aloneness, if used intentionally, transforms into a reservoir of creative and moral power. Isolation is not emptiness, it's condensation. The highly intelligent loner learns to distill experience into clarity, emotion into art, perception into principle. When most people drown in their own stimuli, we refine attention into presence. This is why Schopenhauer revered the philosopher and artist they use solitude as a forge where chaos becomes order. He believed that true genius is not born in crowds but in hours of unbroken privacy. The mind, unpolluted by conformity, begins to generate light instead of merely reflecting it. But this process demands enormous integrity. You must confront yourself without anesthesia. You must tolerate the silence where your fears echo. Every shortcut, every distraction shatters the alchemy. The solitude that breeds wisdom is dangerous. Misuse it, and you drift into bitterness or delusion. Use it well, and you awaken a kind of nobility, the quiet confidence of one who requires no applause to know their worth. Freedom, Schopenhauer said, belongs to the man who needs nothing from others' opinions to exist. That statement might sound romantic, even defiant, but in practice, it's terrifying. Most of what we call identity depends on external recognition. We build our self-concept from mirrors, friends, family, social validation. The solitary, intelligent individual smashes those mirrors and must then assemble identity from the raw material inside. At first, it feels like disorientation or madness, but over time, something remarkable happens. When you stop depending on reflections, your sense of self deepens into something firm and silent, untouched by external chaos. That inner stillness becomes power because now no one can grant or revoke your peace. You are free not only from others' opinions but from your own compulsions. And that is the ultimate rebellion in Schopenhauer's philosophy. Liberation from the tyranny of desire itself. He believed most suffering originates from craving to be recognized, to be loved, to be validated. But the intelligent loner, once matured, transcends this craving by understanding its futility. You don't repress desire, you outgrow it. You still love, still create, still care, but no longer as hunger, only as overflow. So what does this mean practically in our overstimulated century? It means learning to turn solitude into structure. Start protecting time the way others protect reputation. Instead of asking, "Who will understand me?" ask, "What will I understand in stillness?" Begin using your isolation strategically. Read slowly, think deeply, engage with complexity that social speed rejects. That's how solitude becomes an instrument, not a punishment. The goal isn't to escape the world, it's to perceive it lucidly enough that you can act freely within it. When your thoughts are shaped by solitude, your choices stop being reactive. Imagine how much chaos disappears when you no longer respond impulsively to every noise, message, or social cue. Schopenhauer said that solitude clarifies the hierarchy of value. Suddenly, what once felt urgent fades into insignificance. You rediscover essentials: truth over trend, quality over applause, peace over popularity. The loner's rebellion, therefore, isn't loud, it's aesthetic. In a society frantic for attention, calm becomes countercultural. Silence becomes resistance. Stillness becomes influence. And finally, here lies the noblest paradox of all. The journey that begins in isolation often ends in universal compassion. Schopenhauer, despite his grim realism, believed that understanding suffering beyond ego leads to transcendence. When the intelligent loner stops resenting solitude and starts understanding it, detachment turns into wisdom that sees through difference into unity. You realize that your apartness equipped you to perceive life's shared vulnerability more clearly. You may stand alone, but you no longer feel superior. Instead, you feel connected to everything that exists, precisely because you need nothing from it. That is the true aristocracy of the spirit, not dominance, but depth, not pride, but peace. In that state, every moment of solitude transforms into communion with truth itself. You speak little because life becomes eloquent enough. You expect nothing because existence already fills you. Freedom ceases to be an ideal, it becomes a condition of being. So here's the final question Schopenhauer leaves for us, the one most people never dare to answer honestly. If loneliness is the price of clarity and detachment the path to peace, Will you still choose to see clearly? Because once you do, there's no turning back. But those who face truth without flinching, those who embrace solitude as the forge rather than the grave, they don't merely survive life's emptiness, they transform it into artistry, serenity, and timeless strength. Perhaps that's the ultimate secret of the highly intelligent loner. We purchase genuine freedom